With Ahsoka, fan focus has returned on the New Republic's Navy, although for some of us it never left. I've done a video last week on the E-Wing, I've talked many times about the new Mon Calamari cruiser Ahsoka introduced, but there's one ship that I think has really captured fan imagination, and that is the Starhawk class battleship. It was a Starhawk at the Battle of Jakku, which grabbed the Ravager with its tractor beam and pulled it to its death on the planet's surface. But what do we know about the Starhawk besides for the basics? Well, that's what we'll go through in today's video. First of all, appearance-wise, some of you are probably wondering, well, where can I read more about the Starhawk? Unfortunately, we don't get a whole lot, at least in the main material. The Starhawk first appeared in the Aftermath trilogy, which first depicted the Battle of Jakku. There we got a general description of the ship, the idea that it was made of repurposed Star Destroyers, the idea that it's completely state-of-the-art and although made of old ships has a very new appearance on the inside, and of course that it's very formidable. We also see and defend a Starhawk prototype in Star Wars Squadrons. We get another look at the gravity beam or the tractor beam in that game as we see it almost rip apart an enemy ISD. Other than that, Leia thinks about Starhawks helping the Resistance at the Battle of Crate, and we do see a couple of Starhawks information in a manga adaptation of the Legends of Luke Skywalker, where the pair of them are basically plowing through an Imperial fleet, although that may not be fully canon. Let's talk, however, about hard numbers and real details, which we do get from a new canon sourcebook called Starships and Speeders. This was designed for the Fantasy Flight role-playing game system, but as in the past, provides really good information about the ship generally, just don't necessarily take all the specific weapon details as gospel. FFG also created the design of the Starhawk in collaboration with Lucasfilm and created models of it for their Armada tabletop game. Armada actually has a nice description of the Starhawk generally. It describes it as the first capital ship commissioned by the nascent New Republic Defense Fleet after the Battle of Endor. They were assembled at the Nadiri dockyards from the salvage of captured Star Destroyers. The Concorde served as the flagship of Commodore Krista Agate during the capture of the Kuat drive yards, while the Amity and Unity, two other Starhawks, joined her in time for the Battle of Jakku. The Starhawk is the largest ship in the Rebel fleet and can stand against any opposing force, even the fearsome Super Star Destroyer, although I don't quite know about that. I think that's more about the tabletop game than actual lore. But anyway, I brought that up early because I do think it's important to talk about one aspect of the Starhawk. Sometimes you'll hear people talk about a Starhawk 1 or a Starhawk 2. That's really just a creation of Armada. You see the same thing for the Executor and other ships. The idea is that the different Starhawks play a little bit differently. It just gives an extra layer of strategy. Technically, I guess both classes would exist within the lore alongside the prototype, but practically it's not really a distinction that you see really used. Anyway, back to the source book, we learn that the Starhawk is uniquely a battleship, one of only a few which would have existed in the New Republic Navy. At 2.5 kilometers long and 900 meters tall, I'd say it probably earns that classification, especially when you consider its actual role within the fleet. What I find interesting about the Starhawk is the fact that it is, yes, a complete redesign of, captured and often destroyed Imperial Star Destroyers, but certain aspects are also just taken as they existed from the original ships. For example, the Starhawk typically just used ordinary ISD-2 turbo laser batteries. They took them, rearranged them around the ship, and that's how it went. Additionally, you'll see that the Starhawk basically just used the ISD shield bulbs in their original state and function. Same for the engine, so they'd extract these parts from ISDs, probably break down the other metal, and hey, Bob's your uncle. One thing I find really interesting is that this ship entered service extremely quickly. The sourcebook says within 6 months of being commissioned, the first Starhawk was off the assembly line. That's remarkably quick. One thing that Star Wars Legends dealt with when it came to the New Republic was their inability to get new, more powerful ships out of the shipyards. The MC-90 especially was meant as the first next generation Mon Calamari cruiser. They struggled. It took several years for the New Republic to get those operating, so the MC-80B sort of came in service in that midpoint. Another thing I find interesting is the design philosophy of the Starhawk. Whereas the ISD was meant as an intimidating ship above all else, and sometimes that even resulted in loss of true functionality, the Starhawk is the opposite. The sourcebook describes the forward bow as meant to not only take fire and even potentially ram ships, but also to conceal the Starhawk's true size. I will admit, one aspect of this blade that I don't like is the hangar placement. The hangar's located at the front of the ship and surrounded by those 6 tractor beam projectors. That doesn't make sense to me because that means launching fighters are most likely going to face any oncoming fire from whatever the Starhawk is trying to stand down. I'm guessing this was a design necessity because of that big forward prow and where the ship's systems were, but having the fighters launched from the exact opposite place, probably right behind the ship's blade, I think would have been just significantly better. The listed hangar specs, and I don't know if this is meant to be the standard configuration, saw the Starhawk taking with it 6 squadrons of fighters. That's 3 X-Wing squadrons, 2 A-Wing squadrons, and 1 B-Wing squadron. I actually love that fighter configuration, but again, the Starhawk's main weapon really is that gravity beam, and I doubt the fighters can launch when that thing is active, so I don't really know about that. In terms of other specs, I also talked about the size, but we also have weaponry. So it has 10 octuple barbette turbo laser batteries. Those are the big guns on either side of the Imperial II Star Destroyer's superstructure. It has 5 port, 5 starboard. Notably, the ISD-2 only has 8 of those gun batteries, so you'd actually need 1 ISD plus the quarter of another ISD's weapons just for 1 Starhawk. Additionally, it has 24 heavy turbo laser batteries and 24 ion cannon turrets. It has an additional 4 forward-mounted battleship ion cannon batteries, so this thing is great at disabling enemy ships. Then it has 32 hull-mounted concussion missile launchers and, quite interestingly, 36 point defense heavy laser cannon turrets. I've talked before about how the ISD-2 decided to forego point defense turrets in favor of more capital ship killing guns, usually relying on TIE fighters to help protect itself from starfighters. Well, that often didn't go well, and it seems like the Starhawk learned the lesson the Imperials didn't and gives its very valuable ship point defense guns, which is a good call. So while the main super weapon gets a lot of attention and really is devastating, the rest of this thing's guns are absolutely no slouch. But that's all I've got on the Starhawk. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I wish there was more to give you, but I mean, the Starhawk is such a cool ship. I just love the idea of a vessel designed specifically to kill remnants of the Empire. Hopefully it turns out that there were more than 3 designed. That's something that I would really like to see. If you got to the end of this video, let me know. Say you're given control of a Starhawk and an escort fleet. First of all, what do you name the Starhawk? And what's your fleet composition? I'll give you 2 escort cruisers, 5 escort frigates, then you can have 10 corvettes or gunships. I'll also give you 1 carrier. Choose accordingly.